Hello there, and welcome to the Family Wellness Counseling Center YouTube channel. It's always a joy to have you, and today I want us to carry on with the talk on soul wounds. We looked previously on humiliation. Today we are going to look at abandonment. Abandonment as a soul wound is characterized by the deep emotional pain and fear that results from experiences of perceived abandonment, neglect, or rejection by significant caregivers or loved ones. That is what is abandonment. These feelings of abandonment can either be real experiences that happened where key caregivers, parents, spouses neglected, or they rejected, or they walked away, or they abandoned. It could be that actually happened, or it could be perceived, that one perceived that they were not loved as they ought to have been loved, or they were not accepted as they ought to have been accepted. This wound, please note, can form can form in early childhood. If a caregiver is unavailable emotionally or even physically. So please note that abandonment is a wound that really comes in early childhood. And you need to be aware of your experiences when you are growing up. Like I have always said, it is important for us to, with a lot of love, with a lot of understanding, with a lot of empathy, be able to critique our family of origin. Like we said in the previous video, our family of origin is our most definitive and loudest environment that we have come from. However, please note, even though this abandonment wound can be formed in early childhood, please note that it can also develop in life, later in life, due to traumatic experiences, like relationship breakdowns. It doesn't matter the reasons why a divorce happened in your life, but for whatever reasons that happened, could it have been violence or anything, whatever it is that would have happened to have led one to divorce, please know that abandonment is one of the emotional wounds that you're going to have to deal with. The loss of a loved one, and I think death is one of the most selfish experiences that you've got to go through, because even when grief is expected, that somebody is unwell, and we know, and the doctors have told us that chances of this person recovering are next to zero or very minimal. Even when that is there, when this person passes on, there is a sense of abandonment at the end of the day. The other way, later in life, the abandonment wound can be formed, is emotional neglect in relationships, where those relationships are very, very significant. This wound leaves an enduring imprint, creating an intense fear of being left alone, unloved, or unworthy. So please note that it leaves a very deep imprint in our emotions and in our mind. And it creates an intense fear of being left. There's a very intense fear that you do not want to be left. It creates a fear of being alone. Creates a fear you do not want to ever be lonely, or don't want to be without relationships. It creates a fear of being unloved. Somebody who is dealing with a wound of abandonment has a problem, has a fear of not being loved. And they also have, you do not also want to be unworthy. You don't want to, at any given time, to look like your value has gone down. Now, please note that this impacts an individual's self-perception and relationships. So please note that all these things that you are afraid of, unfortunately or fortunately, they will impact our self-perception. What do we think of ourselves? And it will also affect and impact the relationships that we have around us. The abandonment wound is strongly linked to attachment theory, to the theory of attachment, that all of us as social beings would want to be attached somewhere. and it affects that it I mean it's related to the attachment theory, where the absence of consistent secure attachment leads to emotional and mental maladjustments. So the attachment theory says that in the absence of consistent secure attachments, it will lead to emotional and mental maladjustments, and you're going to look at that in a short while. Now, like we said in the previous video, these soul wounds affect our mind and affect our mind, and also affect our emotional well-being, affect our mind and the way we look at ourselves, the way we view, the way we think the world views us, and the way we view the world around us. That includes our relationships, and it also affects our emotional well-being. Briefly, let's look at how the soul wound called abandonment affect us either mentally or emotionally. Now, the first thing that we see with somebody who is dealing with the emotional, with the abandonment wound, is emotional instability. There's a lot of emotional instabilities. Individuals with an abandonment wound, often experience heightened emotional volatility. There's more heightened emotional volatility. Of course, all of us go through those volatile experiences, like maybe we have succeeded, we have passed an exam, or our relationships are working out, or our projects, our businesses are doing well. There's that emotional volatility that is there. However, this wound, the soul wound called abandonment, will heighten emotional volatility, the fear of abandonment, because one has gone through abandonment. So one of the things that they constantly fear is going through abandonment again. So the fear of abandonment triggers intense emotions like anxiety. So at this point, anxiety is heightened. It's very, very intense. Intense emotions of sadness, anger, or even despair. There's a lot of despair when you're dealing with the soul wound called abandonment. The other way we know that there's evidence, there's an issue to do with abandonment, is chronic anxiety and hypervigilance. Of course, we say that anxiety is obsession of an issue or a circumstance whose outcome is unknown. And so at this point, because you are not very sure of the outcomes of the relationships that you're having or the experiences that you're going through, then there is chronic anxiety. You're constantly anxious about your relationship. Some delayed response to a text message will heighten anxiety. But the other thing that we see with people who are dealing with an abandonment issue, because they fear being left alone, there's a lot of hyper vigilance. Now, of course, relationships have got a healthy dose of jealousy, and they have got a healthy dose for vigilance. However, there's a line which we cross over, and unfortunately this line is motivated by some of these soul wounds that you're dealing with. Case in point is abandonment. So that now it is not healthy vigilance, it's not healthy, what you'd call healthy jealousy, but at this time when it becomes hyper vigilance, one is so vigilant. They want to know where you have gone to, who you are with, why you have delayed, and all of that, because they think that you've been away, out of mind. I think that's an English proverb: out of sight, out of mind. And unfortunately for them, that is something, one dealing with an abandonment wound, is something they do not want to ever experience. They want to have a panoramic view of your life. The other symptom we have on the issue of abandonment, the other symptom that we have, that we know that there's some abandonment that you're dealing with, is low self-esteem and low self-worth. Low self-esteem and low self-worth. And we need to be very careful, because regardless of the pep talks that you find, regardless of self-awareness classes that you go to, regardless of self-improvement classes that you go to, if you do not deal with the root cause of this issue, whatever it is that is motivating you to have a low self-esteem, to have and to have a low sense of self-worth. Unless you deal with that root cause, then you'll never be able to break. You'll never be able to break even. The other symptom we have for one who is dealing with a soul wound called abandonment is emotional dependency. There's a lot of dependency emotionally, and it is very important for us to know that, like I mentioned in the last video, that these emotional wounds have potential of developing very dangerous codependent relationship due to the need for security and validation, because this person dealing with abandonment has an acute need for validation and there's an acute need for security. They want to be secure in their relationships. Individuals with abandonment wounds can become emotionally dependent on others to feel safe and valued. So you become emotionally dependent on others, and you know, because, and the reason why that is happening is because there's a need to feel safe and to feel valued. This dependency, and you're going to see this later when you're dealing with them maladjustment as a result of abandonment. This dependency, this emotional dependency, leads to clinginess, so that you become very clingy in your relationships. You know, you are almost parasitic in your relationship. What is the other symptom for evidenced with somebody dealing with an abandonment issue is trust issues and fear of intimacy. Those two issues, trust issues and fear of intimacy. Now, a child growing up, when relationships are predictable, when availability of primary caregivers, loved ones, parents, siblings is predictable, is consistent, and is assured, then this child learns how to trust. You know, this child learns how to trust. One of the cases that I dealt with some time back ago was a young man who was a street boy, grew up in the streets, and we met with him in a specific circumstance, and he said that the mother told him they are going to visit their auntie. The only thing he knows is that the auntie was in Nakuru, and they stopped over in one of the towns near Nairobi, and that is the last time he ever saw the mother. So the mother told him, you stay here, I am coming back in a minute. And that was the last time. And 48 hours later, the boy was still standing there patiently waiting for the mother. Now, anybody who's been abandoned, one of the things that they have got to deal with is trust issues. But then the other thing that we see that is evidenced when one is dealing with the abandonment wound is fear of intimacy. Now, this is what is interesting with the fear of intimacy. Because the last time they went through the motions of dealing with the abandonment wound, they were emotionally attached to somebody. There was a deep emotional intimacy with this other person that they were with. It could have been a spouse, it could have been a parent, it could have been a romantic relationship that they had. And when this person begins to think about the depth of pain that they went through when they were dealing with that abandonment previously, now they do not want to become intimate with anyone. And I'm not just talking about sexual intimacy here. They do not want to become intimate with anyone because they do not want to lose this person. Remember that somebody who is dealing with the abandonment issue is constantly afraid of being left. So for them, being left is not a question of if, it's a question of when. Therefore, they do not want to become emotionally attached. They do not want to become intimate with somebody because the level of intimacy is going to affect them when this person finally leaves. Now, what are some of the maladjustments that we find and are associated with abandonment? Now, please know that maladjustments refer to an individual's inability to cope with the demands and challenges of their environment in a healthy and effective manner. That's what we refer to as maladjustment, referring to an individual's inability to cope with demands and challenges of the environment in a healthy and an effective manner. You'd almost say a mature way, that you deal with these issues in a mature way. The environments that you are in, we have and we live in and we exist in have got demands and they've got challenges. Now, maladjustment suggests that we lack the building tools to be able to deal with these challenges and demands that come our way. It often involves behavior. Maladjustment, allow me to say, involves behavior. It involves thoughts and or emotions, and this hinders that this person's ability to adapt to changes and manage stress. So when you're talking about adjusting, well, rightly or wrongly, we are saying that our emotions are involved, our behavior is involved, how we behave in this environment where there is a stressful or there is a change. So how do we behave? It also refers to our thoughts. How do we think when things change? For example, when somebody who is abandoned, a relationship breaks, is a little bit different from how somebody processes this being left when they have not had an abandonment issue. So their thought patterns and processes for these two people are really, really, really different. Now, what are some of the ways that we see maladjustments happening? And I think it's very, very important for us to look at that before we look at the maladjustments that are associated with abandonment. Now, one of the ways that we know this maladjustment in anyone's life, either as a result of humiliation, as a result of abandonment, as a result of rejection, all these soul wounds. How do we know that there's a maladjustment somewhere? Number one, we know that there's maladjustment when there's difficulty in forming and maintaining relationships. When one is unable to build, to form a meaningful relationship, and is unable to maintain these relationships, then we know there is a problem, somewhere. There's a maladjustment somewhere. There's a reason why this person is being motivated. There's a motivation behind them to not want to form a relationship, or when a relationship is almost breaking down, they do not have the energy, the zeal, or the willpower to want to maintain this relationship and correct it. There's a motivation behind it. Number two, how do we know there's a maladjustment? When there are problems with managing emotions like anxiety, anger, or depression. When one is unable to manage these emotions, anxiety, anger, or depression, then we know that there's a problem somewhere. There's something that we need to deal with. Number three, that there's a maladjustment going on in one's life is behavioral issues. Where there is impulsive behavioral issues, there's aggression, there's withdrawal. That behavior in and of itself begins to suggest that there's some form of maladjustment at some point. And then number four, difficulty in handling transition or stressful situations. Now, abandonment is associated to relationships breaking up. And truth be told, at some point, relationship, even if they do not break up, will need to be adjusted at some point. There is need for adjustment. You're getting married or you are marrying, and your relationship with your parents will need to change at some point. Is there willingness, is there ability to want to change and to adapt to this new environment and to these new changes within the relationships that you're having? That's very, very important. When one is unable to handle stressful situations or transitions, then there's evidence of some maladjustment. So how do we see, what are some of the maladjustments that we find within the abandonment environment when one is dealing with abandonment? Now, remember we said that maladjustments come up when we are looking at ways of handling or coping. It's a coping mechanism, it's a coping strategy. We want to cope with abandonment, and that's when maladjustment come in. So how do we see maladjustment happening? What are some of the coping mechanisms that we find, negative coping mechanisms that we find? And remember, in the previous video we said that these coping mechanisms, this maladjustment may work at the beginning. They may look like they're working at the beginning. They may look like they're providing the necessary tools. They're providing the necessary environment to want to deal with this issue. But please know that at the end of the day, they are detrimental. at the end of the day, they occasion more pain to this person who is dealing with the emotional and mental wound called abandonment. And so it is important to find intervention and to look at ways that this can be dealt with. Number one, allow me to share with us 5 maladjustments that we see with people who are dealing with the abandonment issue. One is attachment and dependency issues. This person dealing with an emotional wound and a mental wound called abandonment, this whole wound called abandonment, they have an attachment and dependency issue. How is this evident? How do we see there's an attachment and a dependency issue? One of the ways that we know there's some issue, there's a wrong coping mechanism, there's a maladjustment, is when one develops codependent relationships. When one becomes overly dependent for their own emotional and mental well-being on other people, so that they are unable to function productively unless they are attached to a relationship. That is why somebody comes out from one relationship that degrades their self-worth and gets into another one that does the same thing and does the same thing, and that pattern continually keeps on replicated again and again and again. Then this person is codependent, that their emotional well-being and their mental well-being is dependent on their interactions and their connections with other people. The other way we know that there is an issue to do with attachment and dependency issue is what we call clinginess. Driven by fear of loss, this person who is dealing with a soul wound called abandonment, because of they are fearing loss, they are fearing being rejected, they may exhibit clingy behavior, seeking constant reassurance or becoming overly dependent on others. And it is very, very important for us to know that. So number one, maladjustment that you find with people dealing with this emotional wound, this soul wound called abandonment, is attachment and dependency. They are attached. They have an issue to do with attachment. There's a problem with attachment, and there's also an issue to do with dependence. Number two, evidence of some maladjustment is emotional withdrawal and avoidance. Emotionally, this person withdraws emotionally so that they are not fully committed in this relationship. They are not fully committed in this relationship. They do not give everything into a relationship because they are fearing to pain and to be messed up later. To protect themselves, this person, to protect him or herself from future or further abandonment and from the potential pain that is associated with abandonment, some of these individuals emotionally withdraw or refuse to engage deeply in relationship. How does avoidance come in? How is the avoidant behavior evidenced here? Is that this person does not want to become emotionally attached. They are okay being alone. They are okay living life without the hustle, the energy, the stress that goes into building healthy, functioning a relationship. Number three evidence of a maladjustment is what we call people pleasing or self-sacrifice. Now, let me say this of the start, that relationships require a healthy dose of pleasing the other person, that you put the interest of the other person ahead of yours. Relationships require some form of self-sacrifice. Now, but unfortunately, somebody dealing with the abandonment wound become people pleaser. So they go beyond the line where you need to put the interest of the other person ahead of you, and they go beyond the line and they become they sacrifice more than they need to do in this relationship. Why? Because they're afraid of being left. So they want to put in everything that they can put in so that they are able to keep and maintain this relationship. To avoid abandonment, individuals may prioritize the needs and desires of others. They will sacrifice their own well-being to gain approval or prevent perceived rejection. That's what they will do. And when that is the motivation, where you put the interest and the needs and the desires of others ahead of yours, when that becomes the motivation, when that becomes the driving force, then at that point, this person is becoming a people pleaser, because they will do anything and everything that is required to keep that relationship, to avoid rejection. Then the other thing that we see with these people pleasing and self-sacrificing people is that they overgive. They overgive. There's a temptation to make themselves indispensable. There's a temptation. You are indispensable, and the issue is that believing that you can give a lot into this relationship, then you are not going to lose it. And unfortunately, some marital relationships that have wounded some of us here is because we have continued on to overgive into that relationship, hoping and believing that this person is going to stop doing what it is that they are doing. Let me tell you the truth is that the more you keep on overgiving, the more you keep on forgiving, the more you keep on allowing all that trash to be dropped at your door, the more that person is going to lower your self-worth, and the more pain you're going to experience when finally this begins to break. It's good to prioritize yourself. It's good to put your interest and your desires ahead, because truth be told, an abandoned person will also abandon others. And even if they do not abandon others, then they are not going to really have capacity to build meaningful, healthy relationships in their life. Number 4, symptom of maladjustment associated with the abandonment wound is jealousy and possessiveness. Remember, I have previously said that every relationship has a healthy dose of jealousy and it has a healthy dose of vigilance. However, one who is dealing with the abandonment wound have a problem. Now they cross that line for healthy jealousy and healthy vigilance, and they become at this point possessive, and they become jealousy. And please remember that the last course you do for you to graduate as a witch is jealousy. So you need to be very careful when you are in a relationship that is causing you to become too jealous. It's time to draw back and to check on yourself. Now, possessive behavior is occasioned by fear of being replaced. So possessiveness, there's a fear of being replaced, and it manifests as possessive or controlling behavior. It manifests itself as controlling and possessive behavior, where one tries to limit a partner's interactions with other people and other things. Now, allow me to say that if somebody genuinely loves you, they will be very honest with the relationships that they see in your life that do not add value to you, that erode your values, and keep on having you change your priorities. That's how relationships are. But when one becomes controlling, they want to decide the kind of relationships that you need to have or you have, then at that point there is a problem. You're dealing not now just with somebody who wants you to become a better version of yourself. You're dealing with somebody who is possessive. How is jealousy manifested? It is the fear of abandonment that heightens feelings of jealousy, often resulting in insecurity about the loyalty of those around this person. So somebody who is dealing with jealousy occasioned by the abandonment wound, one of the issues that they have is that they have a heightened fear, very seriously heightened fear of and it's a product of insecurity, because they are questioning the loyalty of those who are around them, and so they will be very jealous. They would think that your loyalty is given to somebody else or to something else. So number 5, maladjustment occasioned or associated with the soul wound called abandonment is self-sabotage or testing. What is testing behavior? How do we test? How do we use testing in the way we behave. Remember that we said that maladjustment have got to do with our behavior, our emotions, and also our thoughts. So what is this testing behavior that we see associated with the abandonment wound as a coping strategy, as a maladjustment? This resorts to subconsciously testing the loyalty of others, pushing them away to see if they will stay, which ultimately can damage relationships and reinforce their abandonment fears. So this person wants to test. They want to see how far you can reject them. They want to see how, are you here for keeps or are you here? And so they will give you the silent treatment for a week. Why? Because they are thinking you're going to abandon them, and they have been interpreting some things you've been doing, some things you've been saying, and they're interpreting that as one of the steps you're taking to abandon them. And so because they have a fear of being abandoned, they will test you subconsciously. They may not even know that that's what they're doing, but they will test you and they will tell you, if you've got somebody else out there, you go for them and you go to them. Or they will give you the silent treatment to see if you're really going to abandon them. Now, unfortunately, some people do not have the patience, and that can rub them the wrong way when you keep quiet on them. And so when they walk away, when finally this person pushes them away and they go, their fear of abandonment becomes reinforced. Now, how do we see self-sabotaging in the life of somebody who is dealing with the abandonment issue? An individual may sabotage a relationship or opportunity if they feel it's going well. So they will sabotage that opportunity or relationship when they feel that it is going well, fearing that it will ultimately end in rejection. So this person is constantly afraid of being rejected. And because they do not want to wait until that time when they will be rejected in the unforeseeable future, regardless of the commitment and the assurances that these relationships have, or the opportunities that they're in have, regardless of that, because they are fearing a future rejection, they will sabotage that. They will break up those relationships. And that is why you find some people do not have, are unable to keep opportunities, or they're unable to keep relationships. And when you really ask and talk with them, you know that they are the ones who self-sabotage themselves. So they drop these relationships and they draw them away out of their lives because they are afraid. They have a fear of being rejected. Now, like all other soul wounds, and we talked about humiliation, it is very possible for you to heal from this wound. It's very, very possible for you to deal with the behavior, to deal with the emotions, and to deal with the thought patterns and processes associated with the soul wound called abandonment. Head therapy goes a long way in helping you to process the subconscious thoughts that you have in the process of coping and dealing with abandonment. And you've been able to interrogate your behavior, being able to interrogate your thoughts, being able to interrogate your emotions, of course, within a safe environment, is going to help you. And like I always say, that this is the first step to becoming a better version of yourself. Here at Family Wellness Counseling Center, we wish you all the best. We are a phone call away. Reach out to us, and let's see you enjoy good mental and health and emotional health. Thank you very much.